welcome to the SFAR Education and Events Committee webinar for September. Today, the topic is Stay in Your Lane, Navigating Inspection and Insurance Detours to Best Support Your Clients. Just want to thank our wonderful panel for joining us today. We have Dan Hershkowitz, who is the Director of Risk Compliance from the agency. He will be representing compliance and risk management. That domain, we have Leah Nishi from Farmers Insurance. She is a broker at Farmers, and she also has her own brokerage. Pam Parker Murphy from Corcoran Icon Properties in San Francisco will be representing the real estate agent domain. We have Chester Gavarrete from West Valley Structural Corp. He is representing the pest inspection world. And finally, Jason O'Connor from JOC Inspections, whom many of you might know from getting inspections done on your listings. And finally, I'm Jeremy Davidson with Compass. I'm the chair of the committee, and I'm also going to be your moderator for today. So I just want to thank all of you for coming. We have a nice turnout. And without further ado, if we could go to the next slide. Okay, so in this age of compliance and insurance and inspection, and as agents really are being called on to be the hub of the information gathering with their clients, it's ever important to make sure. Oh, is that me? Could just mute everybody here. It's ever important to make sure that we're staying in our own lane as real estate agents and not stepping out of that lane as we are interfacing with all of these different vendors on behalf of our clients, and as we help them interact with vendors as well. So if we think about it, we have a certain amount of time to not only get to the finish line of writing an offer, but getting to the finish line of the close of escrow. So really, who's driving? If we have ourselves and our clients and home and pest inspectors and insurance agents and our broker and compliance in the background, think of us all in the minivan together, and really who's driving. So one of the things we're going to make sure we give a nod to today is that our clients are really the ones in the driver's seat. They're the ones with the hands on the wheel. We may be in the front passenger seat with our foot on the imaginary brake, ready to put a hand on the wheel if necessary. And we have people in the back, great backseat drivers. So who else is in the car with us? Well, today we're going to think about, as I mentioned, insurance, inspection, and risk management. When do we need to get there? When do we need to be able to get all the information we need in order to present a thoughtful offer that might be competitive? When do we need to get to the close of escrow? What kinds of information do we need to get for both of those important stages so that we're doing our due diligence, that our buyer and seller are doing our due diligence? And do we have a map? Do we have a map to get there? Do we have a plan? We're going to talk about that today. And finally, how do we identify and navigate the roadblocks that are ahead in each of these different domains as we're trying to get to the finish line? So these are some kind of general thoughts and questions that we're going to be addressing today. Next slide. So here's the image thinking about, we're on this 2-lane road. We have all of these hazards ahead. Here are, here's that team of professionals in the car. We have the client at the wheel here, and we have twists and turns ahead. So we're going to talk about what those twists and turns look like. Next slide. So as we go through the webinar today, I'd like everybody to think about why might it be important to stay in your lane as a real estate agent. Next slide. Okay, so we're going to start with Dan Hershkowitz. We're going to talk about risk management and some of those twists and turns. What are some of the concerns that somebody concerned with compliance might have? So he's going to take it away. Dan, why don't we talk about these several bullet points quickly, and then we'll go on to the next slide with some of those key questions.
Dan, you're on mute. This is already my third Zoom of the day, and I forgot to unmute myself. With the analogy of in the car, I am, of course, risk management. So you know what I say? Slow down, slow the F down. But uh, Throwing you a little bit of a curveball, Jeremy, we had such a good prep meeting yesterday, and I realized that we really want to hear from these professionals and not from me. I'm going to boil it all down to only two things today. I'm hoping that you take away these two things. One is pronouns. I know this sounds interesting, but it really does affect the way people perceive the transaction and take responsibility. And so I really encourage you not to do an us and a them and a we, but instead the seller and the buyer. And so if your communication to the other side says, thank you very much, please send the seller the following documents as per the contract. I will make sure that the seller reviews them within the time frame stated in the contract, and the seller will provide an answer to the buyer as required by the contract. We take the personality out of it, and we also take your own personal responsibility out of it. Although I admire that all of us as agents want to be in this thing with our clients and think that this is a team effort, in terms of risk management and understanding all the complexities of what we're to talk about today, it's the client who needs to understand and it's the client who needs to make the decisions. And so switching your pronouns to the seller and the buyer and eliminating the we and the us and the them turns out to be very helpful. So I throw that out to you. And there's one other thought I want to leave you with today, and that's the concept of asking for help as a sign of strength. And so I used to make fun of my mother, who was a marriage and family counselor, Linda Rose, lovely woman, and she had on her um, letterhead, it said Linda Rose Hershkowitz. There was a rose, of course, and then it said asking for help is the sign of strength. And I used to make fun of that all the time, right? I would say, Mom, can you do my laundry for me? Look, I'm asking for help. I'm so strong. Mom, can you, right? Um, and honestly, it wasn't until close to her death that I really started to understand. And so I'll just throw this little story out for you. I'm holding up my right hand, and on my right hand is my ring, my wedding ring. And why is it on my right hand? Well, not because I'm European, but because it doesn't fit on my left hand. This knuckle is permanently swollen. I got bit by a little French bulldog named Biscuit. And when I was at my neurologist about 2 months later, I said to my neurologist on the way out, hey, oh, look at my hand here. It won't go down. And I showed her the ring. And I said, is that going to be like that forever? And she said to me, I'm a neurologist. What the fuck do I know about hands? And I said, all right, well, that's a good point. But she said, come here a minute. And she wrote down on a piece of paper the name of a hand specialist. And she said, her name is Jill. She and I are good friends. Tell her that I sent you, and she'll move you from a 6-month wait to a 1-week wait. And I said, thank you so much. And so I put that out there to say, did that neurologist give me great service? She did. Did she admit freely that she knows a hell of a lot more about hands than I ever will? I mean, she went to medical school, but that she's not a hand specialist? She did. Did she give me a great referral? She did. And am I going to go back to her in the future for all my neurology needs and recommend her to all everybody I know as the best neurologist? I will, right? And so asking for help is a sign of strength, and admitting to your clients that, oh, that's an excellent question. I don't know that, but I do have resources, right? You and your book of resources are one of your greatest assets, and use it, right? And so when you send somebody to a pest inspector or to an attorney or to an accountant or to someone who knows HOAs and HOA accounting, right? You send them with a list of questions and you say, here are the questions that I think you should focus on, right? These are the things that are most relevant in my experience and the pitfalls and the traps that I've seen my clients fall into in the past, right? And I want to make sure that you learn from my experience. Is that giving great service? It sure is. And is that helping keeping you out of trouble, right? To prevent you from speculating? It is, and it does. And so I leave you with two things today. Pronouns matter, and send them to a hand specialist. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Dan. And in addition to those two, if we're addressing that third question there on the screen, You also mentioned something that is really great, that you can send your clients with a list of questions to inspectors who've inspected the property and they want more information, or pursuing an insurance quote. So helping them with that as well.
Appreciate that. And that's where a lot of the value comes from, right? So when I'm advising my client, my agents to send somebody to a local qualified landlord attorney, for example, what I'll do is I'll say, and here are the 4 or 5 or 6 topic areas that it's most important for them to consider, right? And that's real value. It shows that you know and that you have experience, and it helps direct this conversation, right? But it also makes everybody understand that there's some things that you can't do. And you're not a foreman, you're not a general contractor, you're not an accountant, and you're not an attorney, right? And now you're not an insurance specialist either, right? These are the most important areas that we see these days, and the most likely place where the agents will overstep. All right, thank you very much.
Dan, one quick question. Number 2, what is a common practice among agents that you see that actually isn't good practice
The
when,
we,
when agents are trying to be helpful?
yeah, I'd say there's 2 things. One is the we, right? The we, the we, the we. And here's what happens with the we. You'll get an agent or client who will say to you, well, you know what, Dan, I trust you. What do you think I should do? What they're really saying to you is, if anything goes wrong, I'm going to sue you, right? That's what they really meant by, I trust you. What should we do? So the we is really important thing, right? And so the answer is, okay, this isn't about trust. This is about evaluating risk. Here are the things that the inspector pointed out, including further inspection, right? And if you move forward without them, you are going to be putting yourself at risk. Do you realize that? I do. Good. I'm going to put that in writing for you. And then I'm going to ask you to make a decision, right? And here are the 3 decisions that you could make. 1, you could cancel the contract and walk away. 2, we could ask for an extension of time so you could have further inspections. Or 3, you could ask for them to repair or credit you what you think this is going to cost. The problem was the latter is evaluating what this is going to cost. That requires further inspection from an expert. I'm going to send you that reminder. You're going to tell me what to do. I think that's really important. And then finally, the other place that people go wrong is failure to consider the worst case scenario. So it may be true that typically this does not result in X, Y, and Z. But you need to think, what would be the worst case scenario, right here? What if this thing isn't performing? What if the neighbor's claim regarding the fence line is in fact legitimate, right? What would that mean to you, right? And so talking about the worst case scenario and making sure that they appreciate the worst case scenario is in fact probably one of the places where we fall, where we fail the most.
Great. Thank you, Dan.
Sure.
Okay, next slide. Okay, moving on to real estate twists and turns. So we have Pam Parker Murphy from Corcoran Icon Properties, who, Pam, why don't you take a stab at some of these to kind of get us thinking about what some of these concerns are that we agents have in the field, and then we'll go on to the next slide with some of those key questions for us to really drill down.
Great. Thank you, Jeremy. So I think we're all aware that we're in, what some people may consider an insurance crisis. And especially here in San Francisco, where we have a lot of historic homes, we're faced with issues around old knob and tube wiring and old roofs, and in some cases, brick foundations. And all of those things bring up incredible red flags to insurance companies. We all know that anyone that's getting a loan, the lender is going to require insurance. So what do we do? What are the strategies? What are the things that we can do to really best serve our clients? And I think that we have to remind ourselves as realtors that our key focus and our role is to be an advisor, to guide our clients. We're not going to be able to solve the problems, but we need to help them make the most critical decisions. And the best way we can do that is to lend our expertise. Now, I think when we talk about staying in our own lane, we have to realize, what is our lane? Are we an expert in everything? Absolutely not. And so the best thing that we can do is to be a resource and be a conduit for not only the resources, but the information, the data. Be an expert on who are the top vendors, the top inspectors, the top contractors that can help advise your buyers to make the most thoughtful decisions. So it is more complicated than it was 2 years ago, than it was 5 years ago. That's for sure. There's definitely more landmines, there's more potholes, but kind of like, and I give this analogy to my buyers all the time. We are in a position where as we go through the escrow process, there will be twists and turns, and there will absolutely be things that will come up, and that is normal. It is our job to kind of set their expectations. We need to be prepared for any questions or things that may come up, and what that means is that there's going to be a little turbulence, just like any cross-country flight. There's turbulence, and we're in the cockpit together. I am the pilot. I will help steer around the turbulence so that this plane does not go down, i.e. fall out of escrow. I think it's important to realize that, yes, we have the ability, we have the expertise to shift things, ask for things as needed should something come up. But I think you have to have a strategy. You have to be in a position where you manage the expectations of your buyer. And you're also in a position to manage the expectations on the sell side if you're representing a buyer. So, if in the event you're in contract and you think you're going to need extra days, don't wait till the last second. Let them know, I think we're going to be in a situation where we may need a couple of extra days, et cetera, et cetera. You need to have a backup plan. What is the contingency? If in the event there is knob and tube, have you disclosed to your buyers, hey, this is the insurance situation, especially with first-time home buyers. We're in an insurance situation where knob and tube is not going to be acceptable to most lenders, to most insurance agents. So here's the contingency plan. You go on a limited insurance plan until you switch out that knob and tube. It may only be a few months, but just know you're going to pay a little bit more for insurance up front, and you can switch at any time. Even though you're going to pay for a year up front, you will get refunded, and you can shift to a better policy, a more comprehensive policy once this is completed. Again, we need to be in an advisory role. We need to share our expertise. And we need to divert and say, you know what? I don't know how much it's going to cost to change out that knob and tube. Let's get an electrical contractor in here and find out. Let's figure this out together. I think that we as agents want to solve the problem, but for the most part, we need our partners, our vendors, our other real estate experts to come together to help inform our clients. I think, we have to remember that real estate is a team sport. None of us go at it alone. We've got our escrow officers, we have our lenders, we certainly have our inspectors, and then of course, all the various tradespeople that are going to address any concerns that may come up. So I think it is our responsibility not to fix the problem, but to be an advisor. Sometimes we have to be an advisor on lots of different levels, but we need to share with them the ramifications of the best case scenario, the worst case scenario. We're getting into a much more competitive landscape, especially since the rates just came down. I'm sure all of you know that there's just a flood of buyers that have hit the market in the last few weeks. We're going to be looking at more non-contingent offers. It's really important that they understand the ramifications of a non-contingent offer, especially for those first-time home buyers. And I talk to my clients, some of the strategies that I use is to help them understand, besides the worst case and best case scenario, is the outcome of the cost of this going to be a deal breaker for you? will knowing more, i.e. getting an additional inspection, change your decision to buy this house? If it is simply just about, the cost of refinishing floors, well, is that going to change your mind? Is the difference between $10,000 and $12,000 going to make you want to pull out of this transaction? So I think we need to guide them and help them understand the ramifications of their decisions. And, will this preempt you from going through with this offer?
Pam, in your sales meetings and just out in the field and thinking about the clients you represent right now,
Mhm.
what is the biggest concentration of concern that you're seeing? Where is it landing?
I think there's a few things that come up. And I think especially with first-time home buyers, you have a concentration of people inflating the worst case scenario. Well, there's like, oh my gosh, I'll never be able to, if I have to replace a new roof, forget it. I'm walking away. It's like, okay, well, let's talk about that, because that new roof is going to be less than $20,000. If you need to put on a new roof and it's $20,000 and everything else is perfect, exactly what you're looking for, is this a reason to walk away? So I think people, first-time home buyers and people that are going from condos or TICs, where they're going to have the responsibility for the entire single-family home, they have to understand, what is realistic. People hear dry rot and they run for the hills, but realistically, some dry rot is not that bad. And I tell all of my buyers, if you have a pest report that is fairly complete and that Section 1 figure is under $5,000 in San Francisco, that is a gift, because we live in a moist environment. These things come up. So I think educating the clients not to panic. Everybody is expecting perfection. These 100-year-old houses aren't perfect. They've been lived in, they've been well loved, and there's going to have some wear and tear, and that's part of the character. So I think really, reining in clients and managing their expectations, making sure their perceptions are on track. In some cases, it's the opposite. And people are like, let's just go in non-contingent. And it's like, hold on, we don't even have inspections on this. Let's not go in non-contingent. If we know it's going to be really competitive, let's do an inspection before we make an offer, so you have peace of mind knowing exactly what you're getting into.
Great.
So.
Wonderful. And maybe 2 sentences on, in all of your meetings and offline conversations with colleagues, is there one thing that you're hearing that agents might be doing that's really helpful or creative, or maybe a different approach or best practice?
I think pre-inspections on extremely competitive properties are absolutely key. And I'm seeing that a little bit more as we get more competitive. So inspections before offers, I'm seeing that. And I'd like to hear if Chester is starting to see a rise in that. That'd be interesting. I think that some people are getting insurance quotes before they make an offer to make sure, yes, indeed, we can get insurance on this property. And I think the mistake, again, like, we can't be making all of those calls and taking care of all of this for our clients. We can let them know, call your insurance agent where you have your car insured, explain, describe the property and find out if this is something that they can insure. Or here's the number of 2 other insurance agents or an insurance broker. I'm happy to hop on a call with you and let's figure out and make sure that this can be insured. And I think doing that ahead of offers is a practice that I'm seeing more and more. And in a lot of cases, especially with these older homes, it's really the best practice, because there's a lot we don't know.
Couldn't agree more. And I think also it shows the seller and the listing agent that your client really means business. So Thank you, Pam, for all of those insights. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, so now on to Leah Nishi at Farmers. Take it away, Leah.
When we were practicing this yesterday, Jeremy pulled up the slide and I said, this is all happening in my email box today, all of these issues. So yeah, the insurance market's gotten really crazy in California. In some ways, yes, we are in an insurance crisis. We are finding it very difficult to insure homes. Premiums are significantly more expensive than they had been even a couple of years ago. And there's a lot of things as both a buyer's agent and a seller's agent you need to be aware of that will help you get through transactions. Okay, next slide. So the problem we're solving right now is really just a lot on these older homes with not having updates. So I know we've talked about knob and tube, and there was a Q&A question, which hopefully that answer helped. If you have knob and tube in your house, the only option that we have, and I write with probably 15 to 20 different carriers, depending on the city, is to go through the California Fair Plan. So the California Fair Plan is a sort of insurer of last resort. They will take the fire risk. They're not necessarily more expensive in San Francisco, Alameda, Berkeley, and the flats. They are pricier up in the hills, but if you're not in a high fire concentration, the premium's actually not too bad. However, there are major gaps in coverage. You have no water coverage, no theft, no liability. So I can get you through escrow, but your buyers have to be aware of these limitations of the policy. And we need the lender roped in from basically day one, so we can all be on the same team to make sure everyone is aware of the plan and what we're doing to navigate through escrow and what their options are post escrow once they get the work done. We are seeing a lot of new non-admitted carriers come in the market. People have a lot of feelings about non-admitted carriers. They are a reality now. It used to be just the really crazy high risk stuff, but now we're seeing them more common writing, we write non-admitted carriers all day long. This doesn't mean that they don't have to follow insurance rules. It doesn't mean that they are insolvent companies. It just means that they are not registered as companies of the state of California and not under California's insurance laws. It also means that their rate increases are not regulated by the California Department of Insurance, but by the insurance of their home state. So there's a little bit more risk in that they are also not fully backed by the California Department of Insurance. But there are a lot of carriers that we use that are solid A+ rated carriers that are non-admitted. My best advice as a buyer's agent would be absolutely to have your clients get an underwritten quote before you put in an offer. Especially first-time buyers are going to be sometimes shell-shocked by the price or the coverages or that kind of stuff. We spend most of Saturday, Sunday, and Monday underwriting clients for offers that they're about to put in. And then we find out if they got the house or not. Don't let your buyers put an offer in on a house unless they make sure it is insurable. This will also let them know if there's claims on the house. Claims is the other 4-letter word besides knob and tube. But if there's claims on the house, that can make it insurable, both if they have a claim they're bringing or if the property has a claim. And if I'm a seller's agent, again, I'm trying to stay in my lane, but if I'm a seller's agent, I sure as hell want to see an insurance quote in the offer so that I know that the people who are placing that offer have done their due diligence ahead of time and know what they're getting into, even a non-contingent offer, because non-contingent seems great until they can't get a loan, they can't get insurance, and then it becomes your problem at the end of the day anyway. So if I'm a seller's agent, I'm definitely looking for an approved insurance quote and an offer. Again, staying in my lane as the insurance agent, those are some advice I would give. Did you want to go on to the...
Thank you. Jen, could we get the next slide?
Hey, Jeremy, can I add one thing?
Sure.
So I think the great agent will be pointing out, if you do go to the fair plan, that we're not going to brush over what Leah said, which was there are some coverages here that don't exist, including liability. Right. And so if and when someone slips and falls on your property, there is no coverage and it could bankrupt you.
So we can issue a standalone liability policy in some cases to close that gap if it will become an owner-occupied property. If it has knob and tube and we have to go to the fair plan, we can issue a standalone liability policy to fill in that gap. It's $846 for the year. But they will only write on owner occupied. If it is going to be a landlord property or somehow not owner occupied, they will not offer that with knob and tube. So yeah, there's major concerns. So like I said, it's for a buyer who very much understands the situation and knows what they're getting into, and hopefully has a path to get the knob and tube out as quickly as possible so that we can switch them to a more comprehensive home policy. But yes, excellent point.
Right.
What problems are we solving? Just availability. So I have a few people on my team. I got a text from one of my people this morning. Hey, I need a landlord quote for this policy. Their policy non-renews tomorrow. So we'd like a little more time than that. But we have to go through each carrier because they all have completely different underwriting guidelines. They all have different fire risk scores, different brush fire scores. What you get in your disclosure packet saying it's not in a high fire zone really has no bearing on our high fire zone. This is another sort of red flag to look out for. So I get emails all the time, all caps, this house is not in the fire zone, give us a quote. And I'm like, it absolutely is in the fire zone. So just trying to figure out which carrier is perfect for each house is what we're spending the most time doing, is just quoting through all these different companies to try and find solutions. What's one thing agents can do to make their get quotes before you put in an offer? It's the number one thing you can do. We'll write them all day long. Most insurance carriers should. Sometimes I'll tell people, listen, here's one underwritten quote. We might have other options, but this one I know I can close. So at least you have an idea of what some pricing could be. Do I think the insurance inspection? Yeah, I mean, I've been an agent for about 8.5, 9 years. I didn't ever really demand inspections before. We'd ask the clients a couple of questions and go from there. I'm now wanting to see inspection reports for almost everything. And part of it is the clients don't know, especially if you've got first-time buyers. So, you'll ask them what kind of plumbing they have. They're like, plumbing, or what, they don't know. So we'll ask for those inspection reports. So I think and it's not to try and trick them. It's not to try and get out of writing insurance. It's to make sure they're properly insured and protected so that there's nothing that comes up later that would cause a claim not to be paid. So we are asking for inspections. I love inspection reports. And I'm always happy to take a look. And I think that's going to become a lot more standard. What do listing agents and sellers need to look out for? There's a great question in the chat. Should a listing agent bring the property to insurance agent to review before going active? We had a long talk about this yesterday, including follow-up calls later. In my opinion, not as a realtor, I would want to get that to make sure there's no claims on the house. Claims can be a deal killer. I know you ask your clients if they have claims. I want to talk about the $0 claim. If your client, your seller, calls up their 1-800 number of their insurance company and says, there's water coming in my house, and the insurance company says, oh, we're not going to cover that, or it's under your deductible, or whatever, the client might not realize that that is a claim. Anytime you call and ask that question to the 1-800 number, they will register as a claim. So they might say no because there was no payout on it, or it just didn't go anywhere. But that does count as a claim, and it could become an issue when you're going to write the insurance policy and go through escrow on the house. So I think if you as the seller's agent have that knowledge of, hey, maybe there's going to be a high fire risk, or there's a couple of claims on this house, or there's knob and tube, it will help you at least know those challenges going into the listing, and will help you when you're reviewing offers. You can see who did get an underwritten insurance quote, and maybe they've already addressed those things. Does that help?
That's great, Leah. Thank you, Rob. Hopefully that answered your question. Wonderful. Well, let's move on to the domain of inspection. We have Jason and Chester. who can kind of divvy up the twists and turns here. So maybe just spend a couple minutes talking about a couple of these that jump out at you. Which one of you would like to take it away here?
Yeah, hi you guys. My name is Chester. So on my side, as far as the termite inspection, some of the things that we talked about yesterday was stucco hole tests on properties, and other areas of concerns such as stairs, decks, and unseen or areas that require further inspections. These are all areas that can potentially lead to surprise or are potentially expensive areas to repair. I do think as a agent, it's really important to hire somebody who is familiar with the area that you're inspecting in, is familiar with the repair process, and understands true costs for repairs for these items. Um, as an inspector, I do know that there are several termite companies that don't do repairs and focus specifically on treatment. So you have to make sure that the cost that's provided to you is the true cost for that repair, and that company that you're hiring understands what it takes to do repairs on older homes, especially in San Francisco. Um, I think that one of the areas that is a concern, more than abutments and unseen damage, is stairs and decks. I know there's going to be some new compliances that are going to need to be addressed for properties and multi-family homes. So I think that that is an area that I would definitely have some hyper attention paid to. And yeah, so that's kind of my opinion on the termite side of the inspection process. I don't know if Jason has an opinion to share on this as well.
Yeah, so basically from my standpoint, especially doing houses in the city, we talk about modern building code, and realistically, almost none of the houses that we do are up to the most current building codes. And that's not a concern on our half. We don't enforce code through our inspections. The biggest things that we look out for are, the structural integrity of the home, any outdated systems, like whether it be mechanical or electrical, anything that's hazardous or may become a big issue moving forward. The biggest things basically we look out for safety, and I know that that's also what is becoming an issue with insurance companies now, where things that down the line are going to cause bigger issues in these older homes, whether it be older roofs that may leak, whether it be older plumbing that may galvanized steel supply lines that may corrode and cause leakage, same as drain lines, and then obviously electrical issues that could potentially be a fire hazard. And that's all part of our inspection scope. So yeah, that's I think Chester kind of covered a lot of the unseen areas and that, but
great. Why don't we go to the next slide and we can drill down a little bit into the key questions. So could one of you or both of you talk about maybe any industry or regulatory changes that you're seeing that are affecting agents and home buyers and sellers now, or that you think are going to be affecting them in the near future?
Yeah,
Well,
definitely. Sorry, go on.
Go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, definitely.
you know, the knob and tube and the brick foundations are the biggest thing that are kind of affecting home buyers and sellers now. You know, we definitely always advise to get pre-sale inspections, that everything can be kind of disclosed from day one, that nothing comes up after that can potentially make the deal fall through. So, you know, we always do recommend for the sellers to get the inspections on their half. Get an inspector that, you know, has obviously the correct credentials and the right experience to do a thorough, unbiased inspection of the home, and, you know, make sure that you kind of get to the bottom of everything, and everything is disclosed from day one. How agents can get a worthwhile inspection report. I think it's important for, you know, the clients, whether it be the sellers or the buyers, to, number one, read all the pre-inspection agreements, know exactly in depth the scope of inspection that you're getting. And then, you know, we do always recommend that the clients attend the inspection, that they can bounce back, ask questions, get a full understanding. Sometimes it can be hard to kind of take everything from a home inspection, from the report, and actually understand the whole home, especially if you're not familiar with a lot of the things that we talk about in the reports. So yeah, I definitely always recommend that clients be there, that we can break it down and bring them to the areas of concern, and that they fully understand. And, you know, in person, we can obviously go into more depth of how to go about these things, how to get them fixed, who to call, etc.
– Very helpful.
Yeah,
Chester,
and I
do you have
think on
anything
the
to add? Sorry.
Yeah, definitely. I think that something that a lot of people are going to be faced with are the new deck and balcony inspection regulations for, I think it's SB 721 and SB 326. So those are inspections of decks and balconies or protruding structures from a building. These are things that often are neglected, often are very expensive repairs that people don't take care of, like knob and tube, you know. So I think for buyers and sellers, or for homeowners, you know, they just need to be prepared for this potential expense that may be coming down the line due to regulation changes and due to requirements by insurance companies and local building code or building inspections. I think three things that are easy to do to make a pre-sale listing less upsetting. One is, you know, as agents, it's important to let your customer know that no property is perfect. There's going to be things that they may not like about the inspection that may get them upset, but at the end of the day, we're all just doing a non-bias inspection to provide a clear perspective of issues that the home has. You know, having a property ready for inspections, not having painters there, not having things under construction will definitely help, you know, having a smoother process for the inspection. And like Jason said, having somebody there, either the sellers or the buyers, present for a potential review. And, you know, in regards to staying in your lane, sellers need to understand that you know, we're not here to put their house down. We're just here to give them an idea of what's going on with the home itself, and how to get a worthwhile inspection. I think it's just important to hire, you know, professional Jason or myself to you know, give you an inspection, and hire people that are doing this on a daily basis and come prepared to do the job that they're hired to do.
Wonderful. Why don't we go on to the next slide? So we've had some great Q&A in the chat. And Leah, thank you for taking on some answering there. I encourage, and I imagine that the participants have access to that Q&A. So if you can all take a look at that. And if there's anything that people want to drill deeper, please let us know in the chat. Dan, you had your hand up. Did you get your?
Yeah, I just we threw out the balcony thing, and it just reminded me, we could do a whole class on that, as you reminded us yesterday. But for those practitioners, just as a reminder, there's both a state law that was referenced and also a local ordinance. And the good news is our forms committee has done a good job of updating our San Francisco seller disclosure to ask the right questions. But if you're going to be working proactively representing a seller, it certainly would be a very good idea to pull that out early, find out what those answers are. If your client is working with if your client is a condominium owner, the obligation doesn't fall upon your client individually, it falls upon the HOA. Though it would be probably a good idea to find out whether or not the HOA has in fact done those inspections, and make sure you have those reports as part of your HOA documents. Thank you.
Thanks, Dan. So we have a question for pre-inspection. Should the buyer's agent and the buyer themselves be present, or just the buyer's agent? Pam, did you want to take that?
Sure. I think it's really critical that not only does the buyer's agent need to be present, but that the actual buyers, whether they're first-time home buyers or they're seasoned people and they're buying up for the third time, I think it's absolutely critical that they understand and they know what they're getting into, especially in a home with some known roadblocks, such as the brick foundation or the knob and tube, or in some cases, just understanding that certain dry rot can be fixed very easily if it's accessible, and other types of dry rot are not only going to need to be repaired, but there's going to be cosmetic things if you're going into old lath and plaster and sheetrock, and the same thing goes with any electrical work. There may be a cost to the electrical work and then an additional cost to close up those walls and repaint. So again, we are not experts at inspections as agents. All of us have been on probably hundreds of them, but let's let the experts, i.e. the Chesters of the world, guide our clients in better understanding the ramifications of what the issues are and how they can be solved.
Thank you, Pam. Building on that, Dan, can you just talk a little bit about why the buyer agent should not be the unaccompanied intermediary between the inspector on that inspection visit and the client going back and reporting and saying, hey, the inspection was today, et cetera. Can you just comment a little bit of that from your point of view?
Yeah, I was just about to literally jump in. I was going to say, and Pam, if you have a situation where your clients, the buyers, are unable to make it, I'd love to see a paper trail which says, hey, this is for you, not for me. It's really important. They will issue a report, right? And it's super important that you read that report, but it's also to understand the context, right? And have an opportunity to ask questions. And I don't want you to miss that opportunity on the most expensive thing you're ever going to purchase in your entire life, right? You probably did a better inspection when you bought a used car, right? And it's something that you really need to be here for. And I'd be happy to try to find a better time if you can't make it at that time. I think that would be helpful. And then if they're still not there, you have that paper trail, but then they're going to ask you, they're going to say, hey, Pam, how did it go, right? And Pam's answer is, there's a 22-page report going to be prepared that explains how it went. And unfortunately, that report also has some further inspection recommendations. So before I can say how it went, I can tell you that a very professional inspector was there analyzing what you should be worried about and wrote a 22-page report. Let's wait for the report before we decide, quote unquote, how it went.
Thank you. Let's see, any more questions here? Any other questions from participants?
I just have one sort of thing that we sort of touched on for a second earlier that has come up a lot in the last couple of days. As realtors and as lenders, I don't know if there's any lenders on this call, please don't give numbers to your clients as to how much insurance should cost, or say things like the insurance on this one will be easy. Because it just puts us in a time, and if you're working with a lender and you see that on the estimates, they've put in like $1,200 a year for insurance, know enough to know that that's a red flag, and maybe you should check back, get a quote and check with the lender. We've had a lot of debt to income ratio problems come up because of the cost of insurance, and particularly with first-time buyers. And you know, just, I would ask you double check those numbers. Not that you're a lender, it's not your responsibility, but if you know enough to say, that doesn't seem right, let's make sure we get something in there. Dan, did I blow a big compliance thing on that one?
No, you did great, but I wanted to add, remember that you have a specific insurance contingency. And so the purchase agreement has a separate contingency for the cost and availability of insurance. It is not part of the loan contingency, right? So just because the lender says, wait a minute, $19,000 a year, we can't afford that, or you can't afford that, right? And that blows your debt to income ratio. You no longer qualify for this loan. That doesn't allow your client to back out of the purchase. Why? Because that's an insurance issue, not a lender issue. So says the contract. So don't let go of your insurance contingency, which you have, until you figured it out. Likewise, if you have a condominium contingency, right? Part of that condominium contingency is to make sure that the lender is approving the condominium information. And the thing that the lender is not approving these days is insurance, right? And so if the lender isn't approving the insurance, you need to make sure that you have not removed your HOA review contingency until you figured that out.
Dan, thanks for saying that. I just want to hop in. I have a listing right now where the buyer wrote in an insurance contingency and a loan contingency and an appraisal contingency to address all of this. And I think it's so important not just to educate buyers, like Leah said, that getting the insurance quote is extremely important. I say it's just as important as getting your pre-approval. And also, I had to educate these sellers from day one that we were probably looking at a situation where not only did the buyers have to come in with quotes as part of their offer, but that regardless of the strength of the other kinds of terms that the offers might provide, the insurance factor could be one of the biggest variables that we would have to contend with, not just on offer day, but during escrow. So, you know, we're at a situation where we're pending, but we're looking for backups as well. So I think all of that pre-education and pre-inspection and, you know, consulting with vendors as early as possible in the education of your clients is, you know, it has to happen on both sides. So I appreciate that all of you have really spoken to that today. We have some great questions. Yep.
Jeremy, real quick, for a condominium, remember that the lender is approving both the financial wherewithal of the buyer and the policy. And so as a listing agent, you need to understand what the lenders are thinking of your HOA ahead of time. So do yourself a favor when you get a listing, get the HOA docs as soon as possible, send them to your favorite lender and ask, hey, what red flags are here? Because we've seen a number of condos where the lenders just won't lend on them. Why? Because they can't get the right insurance, right? And they won't lend. And now you know what you're facing, which is you need to sell to an all-cash buyer. And that really changes things.
Yeah. Thanks, Dan. Okay, we have a couple more questions. Can we share an example of a sale where there was knob and tube and how that was mitigated and escrow was able to close? Any property type is okay as an example.
I think that's for me. Maybe it's for Pam. I can tell you, we have a listing, right? A home we're working on right now. It has knob and tube. We are issuing a fair plan plus a liability policy. So there are gaps in coverage. There's no water and no theft coverage, but they will get a fair plan, and the lender is accepting that. So they will take that. The client has to pay the first payment for the fair plan. It can't all be through closing because fair plan won't issue documents without payment. So we are issuing the fair plan that will get them through escrow. In this case, the buyer has an electrician lined up. Basically, 2 days after they close escrow, the plan is for the electrician to go in, get rid of the knob and tube, and then we will go ahead and issue a normal policy. So in those cases, we are sending out quotes, both current and sort of a post knob and tube quote, so that they can get an idea of what that premium would look like. Pam, I think it's for you.
I think you brought up some really good points. And as a listing agent, I have a listing coming up that is a stunning historic home. And one of the things that we're going to be doing, we know there's knob and tube. We are going to be getting a quote from an electrician, what it would take to change out all of that knob and tube. And that'll be part of the disclosures, so that individual buyers will actually know what they're getting into.
Great. Thank you, Pam. Okay, let's see. Okay. Dan. So Liz Hirsch asked, Dan, does that advice stand if the seller's doing the pre-inspection? So if the seller doing the pre-inspection is out of the country, how might an agent handle that?
Well, I'm not nearly as worried with the seller doing a pre-inspection, but that raises what Pam just said, which is the seller needs to make these decisions, right? And so you need to make sure that the seller is the one who's choosing these reports, and you're making recommendations, and you're explaining the pros and the cons. So the pro that Pam just told us is, hey, let's clear some hurdles and find out ahead of time whether or not knob and tube is going to be policies now, and the buyers need to know if they're going to go to the fair plan or not. That's the pro. And maybe the answer is you're going to do it ahead of time so you have a bigger pool of buyers, right? Maybe it's worth a 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, $80,000 investment. But here's the con. The moment we have that bid, we have it forever and we can't bury it. Even if you think it's outrageous number, you need to provide that to the buyer, right? That doesn't mean you couldn't get another one that's better, right? And emphasize that, but you need to provide it. So there are pros and cons. And so when the seller's out of the country, you need to make sure that the seller is the one who authorizes you to have a pest inspection, authorizes the test holes, which I personally think are a very good idea, but they need to authorize that second, come back, do the test holes. And then, of course, a new number will be attached to it based on what those test holes show.
Thank you, Dan. Well, I have been told by the powers that be that we need to wrap this up. We are at an hour. I want to thank our wonderful panel. Thank you so much for bringing your insights, your expertise. Really, agents, think about the importance of staying in your lane as you're representing both your buyers and sellers. And remember to call on vendors like these who are thoughtful and really out there for client service. We're so lucky to have all of you as part of our SFAR family. And thanks so much for being with us today. And thanks to all the participants for joining.